Looks like we are live. Ash, we're live. Dave, we're live. No, it's this is what, podcast number 13.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm back, so it's nice to be back for another episode with you guys. I know you guys been working pretty diligently on the Merge project, and I'm pretty excited to catch up and hear all about it. Whatever it is you guys are willing to disclose at this point, that is. And see how you guys are doing. Happy hour vibes.
Yeah, I mean, happy to have you back. I know that Ash and I have been holding the fort, but your presence, I think, was really missed on the podcast. Just
Thanks, guys.
having someone to anchor the crazy, anchor stuff, but also just a color perspective in a way that I think sometimes when you're just in the middle of the trenches, you just can't quite visualize. So
Right.
it's great to have you back, and hopefully in better spirits than what the last few weeks have maybe entailed in your personal life without going into too much detail.
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully, there's a nice, relaxing end of the week for everyone.
Yeah. I always appreciate getting together with you guys, and I know we always have some quality conversations. I've been missing out a little bit of the action, but still super stoked about what I am seeing going on. And to that, I'd love to maybe just turn it over to one of you guys so you guys can talk a little bit about what's up, what you guys been working on this week, and go from there.
Yeah, last couple weeks have just been heads down mostly, right? David's like race to the finish for Merge. We got 1 week left.
Right.
So.
Yeah, 1 week to ship it.
To ship
the project that is about the merge. The merge is not happening within a week for anybody who is concerned.
It is interesting to think about like timelines of minting. It's like what's like I don't have much info on that, David. It's like what is the kind of common intervals that minting is allowed or that you're aware of? Is it like all turns? Basically, it's like one is it depends on the supply and how fast it sells out, right? That's one component. And then what's a longer minting period that you've seen that works, basically? Because this is going to be stretched out over 2 weeks.
I think the moment you add it works, my search query just went from this to like that. Yeah. Certainly there's been a lot of projects. Well, it does seem like the standing philosophy has always been like gas wars are good, right? Like it's like you click the moment you switch the minting on, it's it's pretty much just like anybody can get in, or if there's like a whitelist feature, but it's largely like fast mints are good. But
usually it all sells out in 1 day or some shit like
or
that.
Or even in a few hours. It's literally just like pretty much greedily trying to they're like the designer of that contract tends to not create a system designed to sandbag, or not sandbag, but designed to reward a longer duration mint experience, right? That's not quite often something that we see, and I do know that we historically have produced, right? I think Hash being the best example, but Mars Mayor, I guess, is another example, but to a qualifying degree. Like how successful is a 1 year span for Mars Mayor? I don't know, right? Like you gotta kind of ask them and about like is the finances of that project worth its time? But at a conceptual level, I think Mars Mayor performatively is really, really exciting. Really, really interesting to me. But there's other projects that just have technically uncapped supply. Like there's like the Tiles art projects where you just put an address and it's kind of like Hash, but for addresses. But to that degree, that project, it's like it has a slow minting out of the merits that like not of design, but more so of like market sentiment. So I guess we're definitely trudging it a little bit in the dark in the sense that like
uncapped supply, 2 week minting period. I mean, those are pretty uncharted waters, I feel like. So
yeah. So we'll see how it goes. It's like I've certainly Ash and I have had so many conversations trying to tune these numbers to what we want, but like there isn't even quite a reference to tune it to, right? Like the closest we get to anything with like a dynamic pricing is like, let's just say the Otherlands Dutch Mint, or like Mutant Apes when they did a Dutch minting experience, or like Art Blocks when they do Dutch prices where they go from higher to lower, but that like usually only lasts a span of like a few hours maximum. Where the Dutch prices eventually reach a place where everybody floods the gates again. But those are designed more so for pricing action than more so as an experience. Like that minting experience is more of distributive than that of like the minting is the fun, right? Like that is more right. Like
so I'd love to actually ask you guys, like backing up a little bit, thinking about like you guys have launched a few projects now, and you guys have had to determine like the supply curve and the way things are going to go a few different times. What's that process like? Like, I feel like this is actually like genuinely really good advice. If you could give this to somebody who was trying to start a project, this would probably really help them out, right? What does that process look like in trying to determine, you know, the whole minting experience and what that looks like in context to supply and the minting curve, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this time it's been so different. I think for one, this one has been so like for this project. I think it's this curve, because we don't have a like that question is just wrong in this context, right? Like we don't have a high supply, so but again, we still have to answer it indirectly, right? But
I mean, it is interesting. It like changes the dynamic to some extent, right? Would there be no max supply? Because I mean, that is kind of like the things like, all right, here's the stock. This is a total inventory we have. Sell out. There's no sell out component in this. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I will want to say that I think for every one of our projects, we've been very exception is Genesis. I think we've, as a studio, been very, very open-minded about how we did tune those numbers. As in, like, one, those numbers have been typically chosen out of poetic qualities. There's usually a, we don't just flatly just choose 10K because it's 10K. We have chosen special numbers along the way. But even when we were designing London Gift, that supply number was moving from like a few thousand to 10,000, and that was a very community conversation of an experience. When we did whenever we do a hash season, it's largely dictated by what we believe is the performance of that generative artwork system. If we believe we do 10,000 of it, it just kind of feels a little mundane. We wouldn't do that. We would tune that number, but even that is kind of a conversation internally. But like this project, because it doesn't have a supply cap, we're kind of doing like an expected value like we're saying, okay, like I think like that's been something Ash been asking me a lot. It's like, okay, with the artwork that we got, what supply is dangerous, right? Like what supply would hit a level where you're just kind of seeing like them to all feel the same. There's a little bit too much redundancy, and so I don't even have an exact. I'm kind of ballparking these numbers too. But that's a very conscious way of designing, right?
Right. It feels much more like black magic. We're just trying to pick shit out of the air and then see what works. I mean, there's no magic thing, right? Actually, we can talk about too is like the prices that we're working with. I mean, essentially for the first 10 days, you can say that this is a free mint to some extent, right?
Right.
For the merge, yes.
Yes.
So I think in the act of us as a studio who doesn't quite do the normal stuff, I don't quite think we apply our thinking very normally, because I do think for maybe traditional studios, it's like you choose either the 10K or around the 6K or the 1K mark, and then you get your artist to design to that set. Where we tend to do is we design the art and we determine the set size in part to the qualities of the art system, right? And if the art system is not capable enough, we can maybe make it a little bit more stronger to get to the number that we want. But like, I think there's a lot more of a conversation between the actual product of the NFT and the number we choose. But like, when you do a PFP, you choose those numbers because they give you good anchor points to create a secondary from. Like, if you have a 10K collection, it's pretty easy to compare that to Bored Apes, for example, right? And just say, okay, 10% gets listed. This Bored Apes only has 2% listed. That is a pretty performative way to keep you at apple to apples with a more popular collection. But that's for us been not something that we want to be constrained by. So I don't think we have done a 10K collection experience. The highest we got was gift, right?
Yeah,
Right.
8.8, which is, I mean, that's basically 10K, right? Close
And
enough.
wasn't
Right.
gift supposed to be like 6,400?
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But which I think that indirectly tells us that like the margin of error when it comes to like if you designed an algorithm to produce art and you were like thinking it's like okay, I thought at the time was about 6,000 was the safety barrier where like you crack 6,000 they start feeling a little
Mhm.
repetitive, but actually I think the margin of error is a little larger in the sense that like most people don't scan the grid as often as you think they do, and feel that way, and I think also gifts stood to benefit from a pretty strong rarity mechanic. Like the names was
Oh,
interesting.
for sure.
The
Yeah.
tile sets, like I think if we were gonna do 8,000 again, ideally we would have 15, a few more tile sets to complement that size. But
Hmm.
um, all in all, it was like as much as we think there's a cap, it's like quite often. I think Hash Saga was really one of those big examples where like I thought our algorithm could only do this, but then people were discovering a whole another capability of it, and it was surprising me. I was just like, well, if I knew that beforehand, we would have more confidence to raise the supply number, right? And and know that the artwork system is more capable than we thought. And so it's black magic, right? Like I think in London Gift, I was very stressed about these numbers, but this time it's like we just don't have to regret it. Like we can't design a number where 2 weeks from now the release happens and we're like shit, like we could have done better.
Right.
Like we just have to choose a number that we feel like we won't go to sleep at night asking what if. Like that's the best we can do with some of these things, especially when we're designing parameters that aren't comparative in any such ways, right? Like I think merge being
Right.
such a weird example where there's like so many stages of its minting experience because sometimes like in the beginning it's free, in the middle it's like a really nice discount zone relative to what your chances are to get a good rare NFT, and then you have like this really degenerate price area where it's more about like catch in at the last minute kind of a deal. Like the variable space is just so different, and so in some ways it's like we're learning as we go, right? With the merge, and I think it's both an interesting commentary on the space that we're really so relatively I guess simple-minded about designs like these, that we haven't been able to really push the minting experience as much as we could. And if we couldn't push the minting experience as hard as we could, you can't imagine that anything else about NFTs we have really innovated upon it, because everybody's stuck on mint and burn, right? So in some ways it really feels like I feel like this is where I feel like the last bull market we're kind of seeing the conscious like things that worked, but then it was like, okay, actually we didn't really push the needle that hard last bull market.
Right.
And I think this is where the bears coming in to help supplant that with more just hopefully daring thinking. But obviously a lot of people have left the industry, so or at least gone quiet. So we're the few standing to do some crazy stuff, right?
Well, this is very much walking through practical usage of the renderer system you build, right? And the layer composition system. So yeah, I mean, I think pretty much after this one, like this is proof essentially that it works and all that stuff, and it's a pain in the ass to do. And then the next one will know how to do it even better.
Yeah,
it made me think about like Pinter, because I was thinking about that last night of trying to get better, stronger, clearer like vision on how exactly that would work, and then how we can use maybe that system for something weird.
Yeah. Yeah, the render is going to be really exciting. I obviously there's still some open things that I want to have answered more formally before I say render.
This is like the system. The renderer system is like kind of perfect for honestly an audio visual context of like plugins, synthesizers, and shit. Like
Hmm.
it makes a lot of sense. Like when I think about it,
Yeah,
in terms of
thinking about it,
like practical application of the composability. Besides just like layers of PFPs.
Yeah.
right.
Which again, it's kind of like the space is so
Yeah,
like stuck on the surface, kind of a quality. Like it, there's just a lot of things that I think there's a lot of people asking. They're like, okay, how do we do this? How do we do
right.
this? Right? And I think we've been very fortunate that we had to answer that question since day zero with
Yeah.
so many solutions that we
What's
never
your
anticipated.
thoughts at like what direction do you think it's going to go? Do you think it's going to be like productized by folks like Manifold and whatnot, like basically the kind of
Hmm.
systems that we're building, or do you think that this work is too, at least for now, in short term future, too custom and too niche and for it to be
Um,
productized?
well, it will be productized, I think,
It will
eventually,
definitely be,
right?
but like, in what
Um,
form do you see that happening?
Hmm.
that's really interesting. I think we have a concept called so we have renderers. I think renderers, like, if you just want to build a UI that allows you to piece together renderers and create a one-of-one NFT like that, indelible, like that already kind of exists. But I think when we're talking fancier and fancier experiences, you're really talking about one of our core technologies that we're using in Merge that is called Rarity Compositing Engine. It's a really massive. It's the name doesn't really suggest much beyond just saying that it's really designed. It's just a contract that coordinates all the constituent contracts, all the constituent data, and gives you like a rarity experience. Like if you want like this kind of visual output or any media output to be rarer than the next, that's what this contract is supposed to perform. Now that system is where we should see productization eventually in the future, where people are like, "Hey, I'm gonna want to create another experience where it's kind of like a PFP, and I just want to have rarity weights. That's all I want." And if that's the case, then you can create a cookie cutter rarity compositing engine to serve that purpose, right? And I feel like as we push the interactivity of NFTs and people are starting to kind of coagulate on like core interactions, that should eventually trickle down to like standardized compositing systems that can be grafted upon as a product, right? And yeah, I mean, I do think like I just think that the economics make sense to do what we do with renderers and compositing
Yeah,
engines. It's financially feasible to pull off. It's
yeah.
technically feasible to pull off. I think it's
My
just now a matter of
theory,
demand, right? Like,
yeah, like my theory actually is that you can't really productize it. I'm thinking that maybe this will play out more like npm modules. It's not really productizable thing. Like you can build
uh,
on top of it, yeah, but it's not like
I think it's gonna be like very narrow rails. It's almost like
yeah, yeah,
comparing like building your own React website to like using Squarespace. Like it's like
Hmm.
yes, yes,
there's like
yeah,
a rail
exactly,
that you
Yeah.
got to
yeah.
follow in
It'll be
Squarespace.
very
It can use the same underlying technology, right? But
yeah,
there's going to be rails. I think that's going to
yes.
happen because there's railed
Yeah, I
versions
mean,
of the
because the thing
rendering
is, like,
system.
we're barely seeing the productization of like, all right, that I mean, so far what they've done really well is like, all right, upload an asset, and then all right, here you get an NFT, just pay some money. And then next is like, all right, just in the on, like you can make it more on chain. Like, what was that company,
Yep.
Indelible Labs? All right,
Hmm.
we can help you put it on chain. Zora's also doing that with the SVG thing, but that's still very basic. Like when is like the any level of like contract customization or like unique behaviors is still being pretty much cut boutique built by Manifold, for clients.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, I do
I'm just
think.
trying to think about like so I am watching Manifold closely to see what things they're productizing in sequence. It's like all right, they have like the airdrop thing and then like a token gate thing, and then now they have like I'm sure they're gonna have like iterative thing, stuff like that. But I haven't seen any kind of like builder experiences or like anything very
Which
interesting around that.
I think
Hmm.
this is a conversation we can have very actively about what is the future for ABF.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Um, because I do know that our current rarity compositing system that we are employing for merge is a little bit bespoke towards its application, but a reductive version of it that is more more designed for a more classical PFB
Coordinator.
experience, where you have a set supply, you can't change the rarity with a constant value. It's a simplified. It's that can exist as a contract. Like it's just a matter of like taking things out of our merge system. And then to that quality, we can adapt ABF to have a lightweight UI that hooks into this specific RCE. RCE standing for Rarity Compositing Engine. And I don't think we'll be able to get to the level of manifold in UI because it's we're not, that's not our interest.
Yeah.
But we can, or it's, since the project is open source, somebody can, could be us, can create a UI that wires an RCE and then takes a compositing renderer.
I mean, I think there's a good chance they will build that, right? It's like, it's not like we're not on their radar. It's like they, in terms of, this is a natural evolution probably, that they will make probably very soon, considering Zora just did this SVG thingy, right?
Yeah.
So I'll talk.
Yeah, I mean, to this extent, I think there's gonna be. I think, honestly, God, I think it's just gonna be a demand problem. Like, it's like is there people out there who want to create collections like this?
I really think it's like an NPM thing. It's like NPM took so long. I was using it like in 2012, some bullshit like that, when it was like alpha version, right?
Yeah, and I think that we may position ABF as just that, like that layer product, instead of like trying to attack into the manifold areas where like they consumerify it. Like, we should just be that technology stack that can be consumerified. Like, I think that reflects our team size, but also our interests, is more on employing technology for our own use than selling ease of access to it for consumers, not for developers, I think. But yeah, like I think our responsibility to this all is like, I think, I'm gonna be honest, is like, making your art on chain, I don't think is just a big enough selling point itself to pay that much gas fees, like to do it. Like, just, I don't think that makes your collection more successful enough to say that, like, I'm gonna spend probably upwards of like 100 times more than if it's a standard IPFS system to go on chain. But then when it gets interesting is when you go on chain not out of provenance but out of interaction necessities, where the on-chain system provides you things that IPFS simply cannot do, and at that point, paying 100 times more starts to feel a little bit more justifiable, right? Because you're accessing a feature that simply does not exist anywhere else, unless you're willing to compromise and become a Web2 NFT. And I think we are probably, as a studio, going to venture into that direction of like doing on-chain for the sake of interactions. And I think that will create a wake in the water, metaphorically, where people say, oh, these are the cool interactions that we can productize into a consumer experience. And that gives a justified reason maybe to.
Well, that makes it even more unproductizable, in my opinion, right? Because it's becoming like there's the room of option, doing it makes, like, if you're gonna do it on chain, you better do it to the maximum, basically, right? Like, you better actually use it, and then if you're gonna actually use it, then there's so many options that you can't even really. It's like
to writing a contract. Where I think we are kind of like gonna always be in that bespoke bleeding edge, but I can see in a far future where like it's almost like FPS games where like a defined set of interactions become productized or game engine-fied.
Yes.
But we're gonna be always more interested in like the bespoke qualities of producing the experience, which I think the bespokeness allows us to extract the most out of the system, allows us to get the most out of the pennies we spend to put things on chain. It's like comparing, I think, like almost like old games like Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 to like a modern Unity. Like Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 was written with assembly code, right? Like And because of that, that game in its time was incredibly performative, right? It performed well on any computer, and then, but like, you can't just use the same Roller Coaster Tycoon
Yeah.
thing to create
Do
100 more
everything.
games, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's just not possible. But then that's where like game engines like Unity
And negative
and
scales,
Unreal
negative
comes,
scaling.
right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think we'll be in camp one, but I think in this way we have a lot of knowledge about
I
informing
mean,
what
that's
camp two is like.
it's a good analogy to make because it was. I mean, basically, the like writing all these custom contracts and stuff is pretty much like Roller Coaster Tycoon style, and then we're moving towards like a Quake Doom being the like. I think Quake Doom was one of the first games create like a scale like they
Yep.
designed a game to be scaled essentially because they made Quake and they were like,
Mhm.
all right, we're gonna make Doom after that using the same shit. Like a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
think
the-
we're right at that level because we
Yeah.
had the old like Terraforms felt like Tycoon,
Yes.
right? Like
yes, yes,
where a lot of parts of our engine is standardized via the renderer system. The only thing that really isn't right now is that RCE and the NFT, right? But you know, maybe there's a day where somebody makes standardized RCEs, and that I don't know if it's out towards our interest to spend that time to engineer it. But we can let you know it's all.
I mean,
it's
we
all
should.
contracts.
It is very actually interesting to think about this. Like, imagine if we were developing a bit, or we started a business back when JavaScript and NPM was not really a thing. Like, no one was like. I remember BitPay was one of the first companies to be like, all right, we're putting our entire stack on JS and NPM, which no one really did at that time, 2011. That's probably kind of the spot where we are at right now. It's like
Reflects the youth of it all, right?
yeah.
True.
Which I just think like I feel very confident saying that the next NFT bull I think will be coming from an expression of some of the thoughts that we're having. And I don't want to say in a manifest destiny way that we'll be the ones manifesting this, because I do know very clearly that there's a lot of teams or personnel out there that are thinking in this semi-modular scaled way to enter the future of highly interactive NFTs, right? We have seen, like, I think Bitwizard, you sent me that ERC 721K, Intelligible Labs exist. A lot of these things are popping up. We've been asked by so many teams that is this something that they can do, and usually the answer is some form of what we're working on or what these teams are working on. So I think this is where the ushering goes into, but to get to there, like it kind of feels like the DeFi bull, like bear market, where like people were like writing white papers of like perpetuals and all these complex things, but just like you haven't even solved the liquidity problem. How do, like what's the point of making a complex prediction market when you can't even like sell it properly, right? And so I think we're trying to pretty much go to is like, okay, let's prove that these things are not just in the abstract, right? Modularity isn't just an ideal; it's practical, right? And through our IPs, and if we can prove that, I think that gets us much closer to that reality that technology can usher us into a very bright future for just the new age of NFTs, where they're not just IPFS stuff that throws parties every once in a while, right? And gives you merchandise. And I think there's been kind of like this current bear market right now with so much blood in the water because of floor prices. I think a lot of people are like thinking it's like you know, what is that team's relationship with its constituent owners, and like what are they trying to get and what are they not trying to get. Like I think this is something I wanted to ask you guys all, was just like a lot of teams, I think it's almost a de facto kind of norm, is like teams don't look at floor prices, and they're like, we're here to focus on whatever they say they focus on, right? There's always been a mythos that like as a team you're a responsible team if you don't look at floor prices,
right?
But I just wanted to gather like what are your guys' thoughts on that statement, as both collectors and also as creators, right?
My immediate reaction would be, if you cultivate the community itself should maybe in turn support the floor price instead of trying to directly I feel like if you're putting finances into supporting your own floor price, it kind of speaks to the lack of faith a community has in your project, perhaps. Um, maybe not in all cases. Um, but I'd also think, like, I wonder what the boundary would be then. Like, if you're really going to start trying to support your floor price, what is the boundary? Like, talking about the floor price probably isn't, there's probably nothing wrong with that. Everybody has access
So-
to the same information,
I
right?
think a lot of teams they sell the idea that like they never talk about floor prices
Right.
internally,
Which
like as
is
if it's like a non concept that like we're focused about the vibes, right? And
right. Which is probably not true, right? Like every team wants to see their project succeed, and in the market we're in, people use floor price as the metric for success, right? Not always, but quite a lot of new people do.
like
right?
my take is like because like apparently Bored Apes, like the founder did a podcast, is like they're like we don't care about like floor prices internally at all, which I felt very disingenuous. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah,
like,
easy to say when it's 80 ETH, right? You know,
right.
That's your
It's
stock
like, to me-
ticker, basically, dude. That's like literally their right.
I
Yeah.
feel like if you want to lead a ship, you should at least know the turbulence of the water.
right.
But then like obviously you shouldn't be guided decision making by the whims of the current of like the the fidelity of the turbulence, which I
Mhm.
think this means like I keep a loose track of the floor prices of all of our constituent assets.
Right.
Not because I'm designing our strategy moving forward as a studio to manipulate or change them, but it feels like to me it's like a like with NFTs, there's just not a lot of ways for us to interface with our communities in a way that isn't isn't just through, I guess, what's the best way to say it? Isn't through just like weird like soft signaling of owners on a Discord. Because I think that's also kind of like the signaling of the most passionate. Where in some ways it's like of all the data we have to understand what's going on within our constituent community, I do think floor price, the number of listed things, the amount of owners are like there are data. I wouldn't say they're the most meaningful data, but they are data that we should be using to health check our stuff. But then sometimes
how do you course correct, right? So let's what decision do you make after, let's say, like, floor price goes down, when what do I do? Nothing, right?
Well, that's I think
Yeah.
I think that's to me like a way of like I feel like it's very bad if you just never made that conscious decision ever. If you're a team, you're just like we're just gonna run in the dark, build cool shit. I feel like when I look at the floor prices, like it's not as where we want. Then it was like, okay, what can we do, right? And we do triage the problem versus not think of it at all. I think there's I think as a team, as the creators of an entity, we have a responsibility to triage, at least at a minimum. Triage is say, hey, like, there's no meaningful way for us to pump a floor price unless we do an airdrop or we give you free money or we like sweep, right? So, but like those like where we don't have the fortunate standing of like a PFP blue chip, then like the best thing we can do, and it's been something that Ash and I we've been saying is like we got to raise the water levels for everybody. Then that's our best way to spend time to hopefully improve these vanity metrics. But like we made a call, right? Like and I feel like on the blue chip level they're like we're sitting on so much money that we're just not going to care. I think at the not successful level it's just like, okay, the project's done, we're just gonna I'm out. I'm like or like I'm gonna go back to my normal life, my full-time job again, and not care about these. I think there's been a lot of low cap projects that kind of sat there, but I think for us it's like, at least for me, I know like I have on my somewhere in my brain like what could we do with piano, what could we do with all these different things. I just will say that right now we have nothing to do, but that doesn't mean we don't think about what we can do, right? But it may not even be a second's worth of a thought, but we're giving it some thought, right? And I feel like as a creator of NFTs, we should give some respect towards the owners, that we give it thought, even if the answer is not what they want to hear. We gave it thought versus implying that's not something you think at all, which I think is also kind of a lie more than truth. But yeah, it's just been something I've been thinking about a lot in the bear markets about like what is the creator's responsibility towards its constituent holders, right?
I'm curious what you guys think with regard to like say valuing an NFT. Like if the floor price came down and the entire market came down as well, maybe it's just a market correction of the actual value of some of these assets. Maybe some of them are being undervalued and some of them are definitely overvalued. But I'm curious with regard to floor price and that whole discussion, what you guys think about valuing an asset and whether floor price can even be used as a metric to actually properly value that asset, even for a few months. It's so volatile.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I think you need to look at floor price and the percent listed over time. Those are the two you need to have in conjunction to properly assess. If there's a lot being listed at a certain floor price, you just have like liquidity walls or sell-off pressure. If you don't have enough buy pressure, whatever, right? Like I think the floor price is in some ways just a reflection of like the balance of that buy-sell liquidity and the need of exit liquidity. When it's really good, the times are really good. It's a speculative vehicle as well, in the sense that like you're speculating upon that there is either one good exit liquidity or two the roadmap will reward you in the future for holding. But we're starting to see in the bear market, I think there's some people who are valuing like what are my IP rights with a owned NFT.
Yeah.
Like I think that some of the Bored Apes folks are pretty conscious of that with their relationship with Yuga Labs and how do I commercialize these NFTs, and I think that does help.
Yeah, for sure.
It's perceived value. I think CryptoPunks, because it's owned by Yuga, is going to start maybe entering that domain, but there's been a lot of healthy conversation because of the whole Tiffany thing about like,
what's the like
rights.
So one of the thoughts I have is like as a consumer collector, like it's much easier for me to buy into something and also be optimistic that the floor price is rising in a situation like where you're buying into a brand of sorts, right? Like GM Studio. And you know that like, okay, theoretically, like the earliest thing, there should be like a gradient of floor price, like from the oldest thing down, right? That you would think maybe, maybe that's not 100% true, but I think that calculation is way more difficult to make for like the low cap or just like one-off projects or like brand new things. And so maybe I personally think we're in a unique place in that regard. But I mean, I don't know, right? It's like at the end of the day, it's like as an artist, you want collectors who don't sell, who stick around, who want to collect it, right? They're not just looking for a flip. And then at the same time, you need volume traded because you want to touch it, get, have as many people see your thing as possible or have a chance to own it. I don't know if there's like all you can do is like I think is the intention, the original intention of the project and the way you launch it and all that stuff and the way you explain why you did it. I think that is more important than doing like a floor sweep or saying like we're gonna do an air like the more mechanical stuff, right? Because like that's not gonna work. I just don't think that's gonna work long term.
For sure. Right.
Yeah, 100%. And like I'm kind of on the standing point like if you lose an ounce of sleep because of your like fear of these things, then you should not be thinking about them in the first place because it's just not worth your time. Then, like I'm in a mental state where I don't lose sleep because of thinking about these numbers because it's like okay, I have faith that what we're doing is incredibly interesting and we are a studio with the culture that I don't think will change anytime soon because of like somebody bought us out or higher ups telling us that you need to grow a business like we are the higher ups, right? Like
I mean, to me the floor price is actually just a good indicator of how classic something is basically, right? Like classic, if I use the analogy of movies, it's like I mean, you always want as a director, you are aware that you obviously need to make a box office, otherwise you're fucked. Like no one's gonna ask you to direct shit unless you're Nolan. And then on top of that, like at the same time, is like that's not, you are always trying to make a classic movie in whatever way that is, and like something that you can watch 10 years later, and and it doesn't feel like so totally out of place. Like that, every collection or every artist should think about it like that, and then I think price floor would naturally follow if that is the intention with every project, but it's not, obviously, right?
Right.
Um, so
Yeah, that's like one of those things where like there's no better way to say it than more just literally say it out loud. Is just like I really don't think people should enjoy proof of beauty NFTs speculating on a direct roadmap to apply to that NFT, because that's not how we internally think. Right? Like if you're gonna buy an NFT, you bought it for its performance up till now, and what performance we gave it for the future already, right? Like you buy London Gift. I hope you're not buying it expecting us to just give you things like right, like or Hash to do that. We spent a lot of time creating that performance already, and we don't release anything, I think, thinking that the performance that we already created isn't enough. Right? We create it, we release it thinking that we're already we spent a lot of time and love building it. We're not going to release a half-assed thing. We may think like, well, maybe there's cooler things we can do in the future, but we don't even promise ourselves that we're going to do that, right? Like I think a lot of the thoughts of how do we reward or continually grow these collections are really whimsical towards the qualities of what we're interested in, which is just like untapped like creative strengths of the NFT medium. So in some ways it's almost like a PSA of sorts to say that like as a studio, like don't ask us, like don't, I hope people won't be frustrated when they're like, why don't you guys not have a roadmap, or why are you guys not promising anything, or an airdrop for being long-term holder. Like when we release a collection, we really do believe that this collection for after like whatever FOMO it gets is performatively, ideologically, largely solid. Like if it's not, then we won't release it, or we go into an alpha beta phase process, which is what ABF is going through, right?
Right.
But I'm not a big fan of like you create a collection, it's pretty good, and then people are just banking on the fact that you're a PFP team and you're gonna create a 10-year plan to throw the best ragers in the world and have the best merchandise or have the whatever, right? That's just
Right.
I'm not particularly interested in that kind of line of business per IP. I'm more interested in growing our creative suite of IPs, and sometimes they share a lot of energies that we can build on top, merge, and London being one of those great synergizing things. But like when we created London, we didn't promise any of this for merge, right? We said we're going to do a merge, but we haven't figured out exactly what we were doing until like 2 months ago, right? So yeah, it's been, I feel like right now there's been so much things on Twitter, like collectors being pissed at teams. It's like you're like, why are you not doing anything, or what doing this, or doing what we want? If you come to us with that, my very honest opinion is like that's up to us to decide. We never sold that part of our business, right? When we sell an NFT, we don't sell those promises, right? Like we always keep those to ourselves because we can't promise it to ourselves. So why sell a lie, right? If we can't say it to ourselves, so we don't. And if you speculate with our NFTs, that's gonna have to. That I hope that's the kind of the expectation with our work. And obviously we have a goal to raise all the waters, but yeah.
I mean, speculation should come from like a place of genuine appreciation, in my opinion, right? It's like the same way like I see a new movie that no one's talking about and I hype the fuck out of it, right? It's like that.
Right.
That is what we want to see. You don't want to see anything else.
Yeah. You shouldn't be expecting us to make a game, right? Like or like or whatever, and like sell you, and you're buying this in the hopes that 1 year later there's a game for you. That's not happening. Like for us, if we create an NFT, it's because we think it's done, not because it just started.
Yeah. But I mean, we are still, I mean, now I feel like we're beginning to scratch the surface of that vision of things, right? Like we're inching towards it. I think like we have yet to fully establish like what we think. The next one we'll do it. I think with Pincer is going to be that first, like if we can pull that off properly.
Yeah, I think
Mm.
we're just as a studio, we're just getting better at creating finished experiences
Yes.
that are exceptional, hopefully. And we worked, and I think now in reflection, we went through a very arduous journey to get to where we are when it comes to exploring so many different technology stacks to solve a problem, which now we hope with the merge has introduced that metaphorical golden egg that we're going to carry forth into
I
greater.
mean, once a chain gets better too, it's just going to only increase that bandwidth too of what we can do.
Right.
And I don't even know, like, when is that? Like, what can we expect for that? Like 2 years from now is like when we can start seeing like sharding and shit like that happening.
I hope. Well,
I hope it's sooner than that.
It's
far away.
Like, I'm gonna be honest. I still feel and I've said this internally so many times. All we need is literally OpenSea to support cross-chain metadata, where I can call Matic smart contracts to perform the on-chain work. That's all we need to enter this future. It's literally like if OpenSea doesn't support it, nobody will, right?
That is true, right? You just need the client to be able to process multiple like sources. That's it. Like, Once you can do that, then you can pretty much do most things you want to do. So.
Yeah, and to me, it's like, well, we got to kind of prove the case, but if we can do, like, for example, right? Like, loosely speaking, to store what we're going to store on chain, it's going to cost us probably it's a prediction ballpark 1 to 2 ETH, right? Which, given that the project does more than 2 ETH, that's profitable, right? Which kind of surprises me if you think about it. That a lot of PFP projects could have went fully on chain if they knew how to, and been a very, very, very profitable business. I think there's been a mythos that going on chain will just cut through your bottom line of your minting fees or whatever. It's actually just not the case.
It's not prohibitively expensive. I mean, it's expensive, just not.
It's expensive, but like. It's not prohibitively, but like if you can access another chain to do that on-chain work for you, then like the price is just out the window. It's just like, right? You go into Matic store, it's probably going to be pennies to the dollar compared to paying 1 ETH here, right? And if that's the case, a lot of things just there. I think there's going to be a future where it's like, why is it not on chain, right? Like. It's almost a sense of responsibility. You should be on chain because the technology is available, the price is economically feasible, the design, the provenance is just simply better. But then you also get to access all of the benefits of on chain, which is interactivity with this case, and hopefully this also ushers us into a future where like I do think there's going to be node providers that like design nodes specifically meant to call on-chain rendering contracts such that they're faster, right? Because right now they're all designed to be single-threaded, they're very slow things.
What's going to call?
So pretty much like imagine if Alchemy has a dedicated node design that's like is designed to call renderers such that it's like they can parallel.
So it has like a higher maybe computation limit and maybe can do
higher limit, maybe accelerates some of the opcodes a little bit for you. It's just designed for that use case. And if that's the case, we wouldn't be waiting like 2 minutes for a call. We could be waiting seconds, right? Like,
oh yeah. Well, you should talk about that how long it actually takes to compute these things because that's a very interesting.
So our on-chain NFTs from Merge will cost. So to give context for anybody who doesn't really know the differences here, gas and gas price, they're two different things. Gas is a computational unit that we don't pay for gas. Once we have a price for it, we pay for that conversion rate, right? But when we talk about just gas, we're just talking about the abstract, not economically speaking, right? So when we call, say, balance of or owner of NFT, we're not paying any money, right? We're just asking for data.
Yeah.
We're asking for computation.
Yeah. So taking one step back, right? It's like within the Solidity contract, there are some functions that are mutating a variable, so like updating it, and then some functions are just reading stuff and then returning and doing some operation returning. And those functions specifically can be done locally. We don't need to do it on chain.
Done locally, done on any node, and it's technically computationally speaking, you're not paying for paying gas fees.
Yeah.
because it's just computing, not storing. But
the code to compute, the instructions to compute is the stuff that lives on chain.
Yeah. That lives on chain. Yes. So with that in mind, this is kind of where the beauty of the on-chain part happens, right? Is instead of storing an image, you stored instructions on chain. Within that call, you construct the data there, right? And so with that in mind, most nodes give you like an artificial, like some limitation, like you can't call a gazillion bazillion gas transactions like ETH calls. If you do, then it's going to blow up Alchemy, right? So they all set a limit. The limit for Alchemy is 550 million, which a block is about 30 million gas. So that's a lot of gas for a single computation.
Yeah.
Infura is about 300, and I believe it's either Geth or Parity, one of those two nodes. They default to about 300 million, right? So 300 million computation you can do. For us, our NFTs will take about 200 million gas to compute an image. And the final image is going to be about 200 kilobytes in size, as a SVG format file.
GIF format, right?
No, it's going to be SVG because we do compositing. Compositing is done with SVG. We're not doing image-based compositing. That actually would kill our gas computation too much.
So you composite to SVG and then convert the SVG to a GIF file.
No, it's just an SVG. You get a GIF out. There's no way on chain for me to render an SVG into a rastered image. If that made any sense. So you're getting an SVG output. That is the output. We were originally thinking we were going to do GIFs, but it's going to hit a computational ceiling that.
Okay. So
maybe
that's
in the future we'll do it again.
Okay.
We'll try.
I'm not aware of that. Yeah. So if we are doing SVGs, that means we need to do the preview work. I need to.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah.
Okay.
Which I was going to tell you, internally. So about 200 million gas, you should be expecting it to take about a few minutes to compute. A few minutes is a long time. It will be computed correctly. It's just 200 million gas.
Slow.
For one, I don't think Alchemy has ever received at a consistent level that massive of a call to simulate, even though it's feasible. And so we're really going to be cracking that limit where we're like, I knew that we can go maybe past the 300 mil, but I wanted us to be safer on the 100 to 200 million mark. Thankfully,
so it can work on any node, just in case.
Yeah, so it can work on anywhere, right? But like obviously, also to be fair, our collection is very intensive. It's 128 pixels by 128 pixel on chain, right? I don't think that the biggest we've ever seen is like 24 by 24. So we're magnitudes bigger, right? And then also there is about 13, 14 theoretical image layers that has to be composited. So that means you got to render 14 GIFs and then put them all together, right? Like we are literally hitting the technical boundaries of the system, where I do believe you can water this down. You can have 6 layers and then have 64 by 64. That would probably be about 50 million gas, right? Within 50 million, that's about a 40-second call, right? For us, this is cracking the limits for just out of design, which, I hope it all works. And if it does, then we know that anything below is easier to pull off. But also in some ways, as a demonstrator, right? Like we're trying to tell the world we can not just do on chain. We can do on chain like at the parity and if not better than traditional systems as well, right? And I think 24 we can do, but 128 that's kind of blowing out of the water, right? That's like a magnitude shift. So I know that theoretically if you have 500 million gas you could technically do 256, but we'll leave that to another day to put that, because that's literally 4 times more data, right? Like as it's a 2-dimensional image. But yeah, like it's like this.
Ideally, we can make some noise, and like from Alchemy, from people noticing that we're using this much computation, and I mean, yeah, right. It's like push the needle.
I mean, we're within the right to do it, right? Like,
Right.
Yeah, and within, I mean, yeah, but the thing is like that we want to see those numbers increase over time, and like you said, get more
Mhm.
efficient, right, in terms
Yeah.
of doing computations like this. And then this may, prove to be a very interesting usage of
Yeah.
Ethereum. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are not realizing yet that like Ethereum isn't just like a global mutation computer and a ledger. It's
Mhm.
also a global calculator that we all can agree to the same sign, right? If I run an ETH node computing this, and you run an ETH node computing this, you could be running on a Linux machine, and I could be running on a Mac using different languages. We would get the same output, and we could both
Right,
trust that
right.
the output is correct because given predicated upon that we ran it on the same EVM, right?
That's a great
So in
insight.
that way, it's not just I get to change the blockchain or the ledger. It's actually more than that. It's actually just a computer that we all agreed upon. All agreed upon the rules, how it works. We all agreed upon how to write to this computer. We all agreed upon how to verify its computation as well. And that's really powerful, right? That's not something that
What do you
Web2 is
think like
able to do, right?
what do you think an alien computer would look like? Like, do you think it would look like something like this where it's globalized?
Sorry, can you say the first half again? I didn't catch it.
Like an alien computer is like, how do you, well, obviously there's many alien, like they'll use it for all kinds of stuff, but like, do you think like, I wonder what like an advanced species, like how they would everything consolidate towards like a global state like this and global computation like this? Centralized,
Understanding
basically
humanity and
centralized. Yeah.
computation, no.
Centralized storage, centralized
It's
computation.
interesting. Yeah.
Well, I just think it's an incredibly inefficient for so much things, for so many applications. And then two, there's always been an incentive for information asymmetricity in this world.
Right.
Maybe modern encryption does make it less of a problem to go onto a global computer, but like there's a lot of information that if you know and somebody doesn't, that's advantage, right?
Mhm.
So we may need to see like the
So like a
ZK
hive
world
mind,
stuff.
maybe like a
Yeah.
alien hive mind type thing. They would prefer this style of doing
A
things.
true one world
Yeah.
alien governance.
Yeah, I think for like human conscious, like as the human mind is designed,
Mhm.
and our understanding of competitiveness and scarcity, less so. But the innovations that a globally agreed upon consistent
Civilization.
calculator is incredibly powerful, right? Like
Yeah.
that's not something we could have said a lot before, right? Like if I were to call HTTPS Google/get search results, I have to just assume
Right.
that they're using a computer that will give me the right results, right? But if I can agree upon that the computer you're using, the computer I'm using is the same, that puts the parity of the power a lot more closer, right? And
Mhm.
it becomes a lot more decentralized as well because anybody can run that same computer on their own systems, right? And that's where I think the global computer becomes incredibly interesting, right?
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised, but it'd be really interesting to see a future where, let's just say you run a supercomputer like a cluster, and you effectively only take EVM based code to parallelize on your supercomputer cluster. So in this way, you're just like a massive ETH node that has the access of parallelization, right? And in this case, you can maybe participate in like a computation market if that exists on ETH2 or on Ethereum. Say, hey, I'm willing to sell a very specialized node computation, and I'm using a standardized programming interface, which is just the EVM, right? You don't have to proprietarily rewrite it for my setup, right? You can use whatever I do, and that nativeness would be really cool. And once it's computed, technically you can verify on your own computer, given that it's going to take a lot longer than a supercomputer, that the same output was produced, right? To have that kind of like cross society, cross language shared calculator, it can be, I think, incredibly meaningful for the future, right? And I think we've already seen that with Ethereum. Or Ethereum is just we've just been all using it as a computer that mutates. But if you just use it as a computer that computes as well, which is what we're doing with on-chain art, there's potential. There's a lot more potential there too, right? And
yeah, and then caching layers will be interesting. Like if people start signing the outputs and publishing the signature, like that, like just stuff like that, like HTTPS style, or like I guess SSL style things for caching of
right, like for example, for us, right, one of the coolest things that I would love to see in the future is like our compositing systems, right? They all our layer compositor that we use to mash 13 layers together, it follows a fairly standardized way of data encoding, right? But then I was thinking is like technically if you can like decode it as a node, you can parallelize all the 13 images onto 13 separate nodes and run it there, get the output, and then recomposite it, right? And that way you're not like, which is what we're doing currently, is calling one image at a time sequentially and then compositing, right? If we can agree upon that the data standard looks like this and that each one of these are black boxes that you can just run on a parallel thread, we can see more accommodating ETH nodes specifically designed for parallelization.
Accelerating these.
Right.
Yeah.
Accelerating these computations, right? Or even caching these computations in a very powerful way, right? And I think that's where we haven't quite seen enough of an application, because like most times you do a calculation on an ETH and you just want the output of a calculator, it's literally just the balance of your ERC20, right? Like that is table stakes. Like that is nothing, right? That's a grain of salt when I'm relatively speaking to more deeper and intensive computation, right? And I think
what other weird stuff do you think you could do? So we got ACID construction, obviously. Besides that, what else? What else are you thinking?
I do think it will open up a more actually meaningful computation market for just generalized computation. I don't know. I think it's kind of hard to know almost right now, because without understanding what actually powerful computations can be conducted, it's hard to say. I think that in the world of DAOs and governance, I do think they would stand to benefit a lot from higher computational systems to produce outputs that their governing body has to read to make better governing decisions.
What does that mean?
I don't know. I said that very abstract because I don't know what that actually means. Yeah, I do think that I don't know how much progress there is, or this is something that actually will happen. But like, say we either go from EVM to the WASM spec, the WebAssembly standard. That could just be really interesting, right? We get to share a calculator that is generalized to Web 2 as well, right?
Yeah, the WASM thing could be sick as fuck.
But yeah, like it's like one of those things. It's like, how do we decentralize, let's say, like a HTTPS call, right? Not just an IPFS asset takeover. It's like, no, I want to have generic black box computation. The only way you can really decentralize that is make it be a smart contract you call, because the smart contract, the code is on chain, the computation engine is also globally accepted, right? So in that case, anybody can serve the request of somebody calling a smart contract, right? Anybody that can have access to an ETH node can serve it, versus a black box HTTPS thing, which means I have to.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where you get the Web 2. That's where you get Web 3 computation, right?
Yeah.
Is it democratizes computation,
yeah.
right?
That makes it competitive.
And obviously we have Alchemy, we have Infura, but technically
Alchemy
you can run it on
probably. Yeah, Alchemy seems hungry that they would be willing to start, aggressively building out features like these. Could be interesting.
Yeah. It's not just even open sourcing the code, which a lot of people do. It's like the implementation and its infrastructure is also open sourced or democratized, right? When you open source, let's just say 0x API, their hosted version is still controlled by 0x. The company has modifications to it to accommodate their infrastructure, right? So it's still a black box that you can replicate, but you'll always replicate an inferior version than 0x API, because when somebody calls https 0x.org/API, nobody's willing to replace that with your computation because that link is correlated to that company. Whereas if I use an ETH address and a smart contract, it's all equal. Like the output should all be equal given that's ran on an EVM, right? So the infrastructure becomes also democratized, right? Anybody can run the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Anybody can compute the infrastructure, can verify the infrastructure is in fact correct. Where with 0x API, you just have to assume that they give you good data and that your UI won't screw up because they gave you the wrong number, right? Which is like a fundamental paradigm shift. That's like a step further in the whole open source grand narrative, right?
Yes.
So our renderers is almost like the first, I think, really proper step into reimagining our thinking related to Ethereum being also just computational infrastructure that is globally received and accepted. And I think that's because of that, we can create Pincer, we can create a lot of these things, right? Without going back down to an HTTPS server. That's a key thing, right? We don't have to do that anymore, right? I'll run a black box infrastructure. Hash is designed for the future when this computation system is more advanced, that we can port the entirety of Hash's HTTP API system out into the world of Ethereum or a EVM system, right? We have designed it hopefully for that future, but there's one or two pieces that's missing for that to happen. But yeah, right. Like this, I think this is where shit's wild, right? This is where you get permanent provenance, technically, right? With your NFTs, right? Is given that you can run with the EVM, you get your media no matter what, right? Because if you have the code in the EVM, you're fine, right? Whereas in HTTPS, you tend to not have the code. You can maybe run it, but they don't give you the code, right? Even if they give you the code, you're always an inferior product to the main canonical version of it, right? So yeah, this is very ranty, but like
it's really interesting though. Yeah.
I do think that like if you were to uncover the whole renderer standard, like this is kind of the core philosophy that we hope will propagate us into that NFT future where like shit's wild, but shit's also Web3 still, right?
Yeah.
Instead of this whole Unreal Engine skinned over NFT stuff that we're seeing.
I felt like that was a real Dave-like proper deep dive.
Very deep dive.
But right, but that was awesome. There's so much interesting information, so many good insights in there, and I keep thinking to myself like the right individual could be missing out on some really good content, right? Like the right person building could be missing out on something that you just said that could really assist them in their mindset or developing their whatever it is they're working on.
I mean, we're kind of getting more and more signal that like more and more people are thinking along our lines. I think we're just kind of have to face it every day more so than other teams because, I mean, any larger team or any team that has investing is going to have like a certain level of relaxation around where like you work and you do what the market does and whatnot. But for us, it's like we really need to have like a strong vision of like why and what direction. Why are we doing this and what direction are we going? Because there's no one holding like no one cutting us a check every week, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, did you guys want to kind of just wrap up here, I guess? Next week we'll be revealing more information around the merge, unless there's anything else you guys want to add, of course.
I think this is pretty good convo.
It was good. Yeah, I mean, to add one final thought to what Ash said, yeah, it's it's like both like a reality of the pressures, but also realities of the fortunates of our position. We don't have higher ups that have a soft, I guess, expectation if they write a check to us at a cadence that's like, hey, you need to perform XYZ immediately with this, and this is what other people are doing. So we get to be a little bit freer about things and do the crazy and the crazier. But two is also, yes, we do feel a fire under our butts that like we can never, I don't think we can ever outdo a venture team doing their thing, right? We're too small. We don't have their money. We don't have their scaling objective to grow a team to 30 people. Right? We don't have any of those assets. So the only way we can give them a good fight is choose battles. Like I'm picturing literally the third Batman Nolan movie where he's just like, I don't remember the quote, but it's just like, he's like, you like when Tom Hardy was like, "You're born in the dark" or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
It's like I was born in the dark. Like that's what we have to do with every battle. NFT is like they come to us, but this is our playing ground, right? Like
you adopted the dark.
You really adopted in the dark. I was born into it, right? That's what I feel like with all of our IPs. It's like you're coming to our turf, right? We're not coming to your turf. You're coming to our turf to fight us out. And we'll obviously getting to the process of understanding this metaphorical darkness is going to be a lot of work, but that's what we're doing right now, right? But in the future, let them come at us, right? We're not touching your area. That area, I've already conceded a long time ago that we're not going to be.
Yes, we're no well-funded Bruce Wayne, just mercenaries.
Right. Well, awesome, guys. I felt like that was great. I guess we'll be getting together again next Friday. So for all you guys who tuned in today, we sure appreciate that. Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern. This is Proof of Beauty Podcast. Thanks for getting together today, guys. It's awesome.
Definitely.